And so if we're talking about trait-based categorization, I like to use this case study, which is linked in your online course shell. So you can go to that and read over that if you like. I suggest you do. It's a really interesting article. Even if you just read the abstract, the intro, and the conclusion, it's a very interesting article. Okay, so Feliciano studied how phenotype and observer characteristics influence racial identity. Okay, so what she did is she looked at people who had profiles on an online dating website. Okay, it's kind of a convenient sample, but what this allowed is to have photographs chosen by the individual, and then also an indication of race. So on this online dating site, you had to, or could, indicate your race. So whether that was white, black, Latino or Latina, Asian American, whatever you wanted to put there. There were a list of categories. And so she chose people for the study who listed themselves as either white, black, Latino or Latina, or any combination thereof. Okay, so you could list, if you were biracial, white and black, white and Latino, Latino and black, however you wanted to do that. Okay, so these are self-identity. Okay, so how people self-identify doesn't always align with how we or someone else would identify them. Okay, and so some of these issues can come up when you're looking at census data. And they talk about this in your textbook as well, that census data uses self-identification of race to correlate race and education or race and socioeconomic status, and to look for general trends in the population of the United States. Okay, but like we've said, this is a social or cultural construct. These things don't actually exist. So how someone identifies might be different than how a group of people or someone outside of themselves might identify them. Okay, and so what this study kind of looked at is to see what is important. Okay, and so it was interesting because instead of just showing pictures of people and saying, well, what racial category would you place this individual in? It allowed the researchers to compare self-identification to outsider identification. Okay, and so what she was looking for was, what's the most important characteristic? Okay, skin color. The study was conducted in the United States, so skin color was the most important phenotypic characteristic that we used to identify people in the study. Okay, so looking at pictures, you could look and say, this person has light skin, they go in the white category. This person has kind of in-between skin, we'll put them in the Latino-Latina category. And this person has very dark skin, they can go in the black category. Okay. So the difference was between perceived and self-identity. So of those people who self-identified as mixed race, they were generally placed into one racial category. Participants didn't often place people into mixed race categories. They usually picked one. Really like to have either in white or black, Latino, Latina, instead of blending those or saying someone could identify as mixed race there. So the observer needed to put people into kind of very strict binary categories, and usually it went to the darker skin tone. So if someone identified as black and white, if their skin was darker than, let's say, the average white individual, they would go in the black category. Okay, and so there wasn't a lot of blending of the races there. Okay, and I think this is just an interesting study to kind of highlight the differences between how you might identify yourself and how other people might identify you. And this just goes to show that these racial categories aren't actually as strict or binary as we like to think of them, and they actually are a bit more fluid and a lot more up to interpretation. Okay, even though we're all using the same characteristics to identify others, we might not be using those to identify ourselves. So if you're of mixed race, maybe you identify more heavily with your white ancestors or your white race than you do with your black or African American race. But because your skin is dark, other people will identify you more closely with the black race. Okay, so the emphasis here is that there's a difference between how you might identify or how someone might self-identify and how an observer would identify an individual.